Welcome back to Spiral Revival, where we explore reality in an ever-curious way. This is Olivia Ladaire.
Hello.
And, hello. We've known each other for a long time.
Yes, since middle school.
Since middle school.
I don't think many people can say they still know people from middle school.
Yeah, I actually remember one day in drama class when, the drama teacher said, the people that you know today, you're probably not going to be friends in a few years. And I remember I was like, what the heck?
Yeah, at the time you were probably like, what?
I know, I'm like, we're always going to be BFFs.
I love my friends. This is forever.
Yeah, and it's funny because we weren't super close in middle school. We just had acting class.
Yeah.
And now we're friends.
Yes,
Close friends.
We rekindled.
Yeah.
Because we're both curious beings.
If you're watching on video, as you can tell from her wonderfully green outfit, Olivia, as everyone should, cares a lot about the environment and is very proactive about that care. So I guess, how long have you been aware of the environmental impact? How has that affected you throughout your life?
Yeah.
The environmental impact we have on the world.
Yeah, that's a great question because it is definitely something that you learn when you grow up.
Yeah.
You know, you learn to go outdoors and love parks and love playing outdoors.
Mm-hmm.
But there's definitely an evolution of thought where you start to realize, oh, maybe what we're doing is not good for the environment.
Mm-hmm.
And I remember that realization being pretty depressive for me, as I think it is for other people.
It's definitely very impactful.
Yeah.
As a child.
Yeah. So my grandpa has always been an amazing human being, just generally. But he was a scientist, a mathematician, and he also just loved our Earth. And so when he was a lot older, in his 80s, and, I was maybe in 12 or something, his passion project later in life was SavePlanetEarth.org, where he wrote blog posts about how we really need to be supporting our Earth better and changing our ways so that we're not just stuck in this system of environmentally degrading practices.
Yeah.
And so that was definitely one of the inspirations for the work that I do today. But I think generally, as humans, we just want to help and care and protect for the things we love.
Yeah.
We want to care and protect the things we love.
Yeah.
And I love being outdoors.
Yeah.
As a kid, it's the cheapest form of entertainment to go to the beach and swim all day in the summer. Or
that's a big thing is altruism, that selfless care and that selfless, the ability to self-sacrifice and put yourself on the line for something else.
Yeah.
I think that what you will do that for, in the animal kingdom, it's your tribe, your family, your species. I feel as humans, we have the logical capabilities and the rational capabilities to figure out something more not based off of just instincts, but based off of rationale. And I think including not only all people in that sense of family and community, but also all earthlings and the environment and this planet.
Yeah.
I think it takes a lot because you have to be able to look at things from a larger perspective and see planet Earth surrounded by the entire universe. And it's okay, I'm not just representing Americans, I'm not just representing Christians, I'm not just representing Latinos, I'm representing Earth amongst the universe. And that's, I feel when we're able to stand up for these things, not as a chore, but truly from the heart.
Yeah, and understand the importance of it. I think a lot of people who want to support the environment and do better for it can feel overwhelmed as an individual. But I personally feel that it's really empowering to think of myself as one little ant and a big ant hill.
Ants are powerful.
Yeah, especially when they work together within a community.
Yeah, I mean, they took over my freezer. I think they were trying to cool down. It was really weird. There was a mass grave in my freezer. I opened it and it was just a pile of dead
You know
ants.
what? I saw that when I slept over at your house.
Yeah, and so I was
what are they doing in the freezer?
I think they were trying to cool down. I don't know. They cooled down a little too much, though. I was very confused. If anyone knows why ants may pile into the freezer and die, No.
They did it as a community, though.
Yeah, they did. They didn't let only one man go down.
Yeah.
They're like, we're all doing this.
Man, that's funny. And if we think about like climate change, which is such a big thing, it's
Yeah.
affecting all of
Exact. And
us.
no borders. It does not
Right.
matter who you are, where
Yes.
you come from, anything.
Yeah.
It's gonna affect everybody,
Right.
and not equally.
Not equally.
For a while, if we keep
Right.
going on the track we're going to, I feel like for a while there will be disparity, but it gets to a point where it's like we're all fucked. I mean, like it doesn't matter what you
Yeah. Yeah.
do. Yeah.
Yeah. A lot of this goes down to your ideas of if you think more globally as a human, or if you think more locally, or if you have a more hopeful outlook into the future,
Yeah.
or a more crisis-oriented future.
Yeah.
Yeah.
And so your grandpa was a big influence on
Yeah.
your care for the environment. When do you feel like you started taking action as an individual?
Yeah. Yeah, that's a wonderful question. Well, first off, I always feel like I could be doing more. I'm trying my best. I know that you really subscribe to the idea of the eternal student, and I do
Yes.
as well. I'm always just trying to be curious and try my best, essentially. I don't think that there's like this vision of like a perfect environmentalist. It's really
Yeah.
hard to be that person
Yeah.
within like these structures that we have. But essentially, I took an environmental studies class in high school. That was pretty devastating.
Yeah.
Pretty devastating.
Like it hit hard.
Yeah, yeah, and I went to an art high school, and so I was really surrounded by art, and I loved it. And I got kind of to this crossroads where I really wanted to go to film school, but I also really wanted to care for the environment and learn it in college. And I had written a paper on how horribly women are treated within Hollywood and the film industry, and also about how environmentally degrading Hollywood films are because of
Yeah.
like how much power and lighting and fossil fuels it all burns.
Yeah. Especially like the ones that piss me off the most are scenes where like there's a flood or something because they actually
Yeah.
have to use that much water.
Yeah.
Probably multiple times.
And just like explosions and
Oh my
all the
gosh.
fun stuff, really.
Yeah.
Anyways, I got to this cross point where I was like, man, the environment is so much more important. Like, so I decided to study environmental studies in college. And so last year was my freshman year of college studying environmental studies, and I still am so happy to be of my decision to study this, but I also realize I can't really leave my art form behind. And I still am really drawn to film and communication through artistic
Right.
means.
Yeah.
And so recently I've really been trying to combine those two.
Yeah.
And I think anyone who's trying to get into an environmental realm of advocacy should really focus on things that inspire them
Yes.
before just advocating for, say, the climate crisis, because that work can be really depressing and really difficult.
Yeah. And that's how you make it unique.
Yeah.
And not attractive in a superficial way, but attractive in a way where people like feel called to it from their heart.
Yeah, absolutely, because then there's real passion behind it. You're passionate about the work you're doing, and you're also advocating for the environment at the same time.
I think that art is the key to the new world that we want to create, because it's something, one, that can't be replaced by artificial intelligence, which I think a lot of things are right now. That's going to be something that remains, because you can't really replace the human artistry and human creations in that realm. Like, you can always make, I don't know, furniture, or even education is being like automated, but art is something, and artistry in general in any field is something that you can try, but it's always going to be like AI art. It's never going to be something that replaces it. And so art, I feel, is able to also it expresses something unique in the human spirit, which resonates with other human beings, and it's like another language from the dream realm that we're able to emit, like, oh, this is my experience and this is how it feels. And language can do that, but in a more rigid way that might not, we're kind of very dependent on everyone's internal dictionary for what we want to say. Like, oh, well, this word means this to me. Or maybe they don't even know your language. Whereas art kind of hits home for everyone. It's universal. It touches on that universal community that we need to save the environment.
Yeah, and artistic expression is such a holistic expression of a human in terms of like their collective past as a human being. And growing up, I have ADD and it was more difficult as a kid, and so I wasn't always really drawn to, say, written text as much as I was like artistic expressions via visual arts and stuff like that. So I think there's just so many ways of communicating messages to people. And I think that I would like to communicate about environmental problems in different ways that may connect to other people.
Yeah, definitely. I think I discovered that with my book. It was something I really wanted to make a point of doing, is expressing the message that I was trying to emit, not only in my academic writing throughout the book, but through quotes about the same subject from great thinkers, so that or like imagery or poetry, that an art in general that goes along and is coming from the same source, because it kind of paints a more holistic image, and it's also more inclusive for people who learn in different ways. Like you were saying, like academic writing might not be very easy for you to, or many people to like totally intake. So maybe something more visual, or
I know you put some playlists in your book too, right? I love that.
Exactly. Yeah, just like a full immersive experience. I love doing that.
Yeah.
Yeah, so when I think of like my history with caring about the environment, it's interesting because my first real memory is when I was about 1 and I was living in Burlington, Vermont, and I was on my balcony and we lived right by the woods. There were people cutting down trees, and I just started like crying and yelling at them. I didn't even know that you weren't supposed to do that. I did, but not for like logical reasons. It just like was not okay. Like, and I was yelling at them like, "Stop! You can't cut the trees down!" And my mom came down like, "Why are you yelling?" And I remember her yelling with me. And looking back, I'm like, "That's crazy! Like, you really just joined me in that." And I think they did stop for a hot second. Like, okay, what are we gonna do? But I wasn't yet aware of the actual impact, you know. And then I think my favorite things to watch on TV was like History Channel and National Geographic and Animal Planet, and so I think that's like a certain type of person. You know what I mean? Like you know who was watching that instead of Barney.
It's also a certain type of person to now like find watching Animal Planet with on a date super sexy.
Oh my gosh.
I'm definitely one of those people.
Yes. Oh my god, Animal Planet is the bomb.
It's so good.
And I remember learning that like we were running out of water, you know?
Yeah.
And I didn't fully understand it, but it was totally terrifying. I was like, we're gonna run out of water. Like, what the
And speaking of which, we're in a drought in California right now. Classic every summer. And
we're
this
desert.
Morning, we're desert. And this morning, my grandpa comes up to me and was like, I just got a message from Governor Newsom that we have to cut down our water usage by 15%, so get to it. I'm pretty good at conserving water. What are you going to do about it?
Exactly. And I mean, I think we'll get into that too, but just like, of course, as individuals, we need to act.
Yeah.
But I think the government does too much of asking us to do something rather than making corporations and big businesses like do something and change their ways. Like, no, like you need to be setting up new regulations and stuff instead of just asking people to do something about it. But yeah, like learning that I ran out of water for about a few years or a year or so.
You didn't drink water.
I bathed. I bathed in like an inch of water. Like I didn't want to shower so I could see how much water I was using, but I didn't use like, I only used an inch of water. And my parents were like, you can use water. And I was like, no, we can't.
Aw,
So those are
lie.
my first experiences, like,
Yeah.
really, that I remember very, very vividly. It did transpire, and I'll share this briefly because I feel like a lot of people relate if they're sensitive and care about the environment. It did lead to a year of, like, debilitating anxiety
Yeah.
in my life. I think I was about 10 years old, and I couldn't leave my room. Like, all I could think about was, like, time and space and how we're destroying our planet, and, like, everything is
Yeah.
temporary and we're all gonna die, and, like, we're, like, nobody's paying attention to what we're
Yeah.
doing. And that, I feel like, has a big impact on people. And I've
Yeah.
noticed a lot of our peers, like, their goals are based around the fact that everything's probably gonna go crazy, and we might
Yeah.
have, like, water wars, and, like, we have to take care of ourselves. Like, so many people I know are like, okay, I want to get a piece of land, or I want to start growing my own food so that when things go crazy, I don't have to depend on the supermarkets, or I don't have to be in a
Yeah.
city, because we all have this feeling of impending doom. And I feel like a
Yeah.
lot of people definitely grew up with wars and other things, but it wasn't like, okay, the entire planet is gonna
Yeah. Yeah, that's a
like
big one.
freak out. Yeah.
Yeah. Yeah, you're certainly not alone in that. And
Mhm.
I definitely felt that when I took my first year of environmental studies. I was like extremely cautious about every piece of plastic that I used and felt extremely guilty
Yeah.
about it.
Yeah.
Extremely guilty to where like I, throughout the day I'd like hoard plastic in my backpack so that
Mm.
later when I got home I could recycle it.
Yeah.
And
I think those are good practices for sure, but I think it's like, how is it impacting you as a human being?
yeah, yeah. And I know like Greta Thunberg like literally had the same thing where she had debilitating anxiety about, and
Yeah.
the climate crisis to where, her work manifested in great triumph in a lot of ways, getting a lot of publicity around
Mhm.
the message. But I think a lot of people feel that. And my response to that is that we were like brought up in a society that is built upon environmentally degrading processes,
Yeah.
such as single use plastic. Like we grow up, our parents give us water bottles, and we're like, great, water. We need to drink water. That's amazing. And then I get to throw it away. We're taught these things.
Yeah.
And because of that, it's very difficult as individuals to step out of that system.
Yeah.
So, for example, this month is Plastic Free July, which is a movement to try to get people to not use plastic during
Yeah.
this month. But that is incredibly difficult as individuals.
Yeah, I mean, we live in a society
Yes.
that is literally dependent on plastics.
Right.
Which
yeah.
it doesn't have to, but
Right.
it's like, that's just how it is right now. So it's like very difficult and kind of silly for individuals in that society to kind of have to figure out ways to change that, or like make an impact without addressing the source.
Yeah. Absolutely. So, in a lot of respects, I think that individual practices can be extremely powerful in
Yeah,
creating change.
definitely.
But when it comes to something like plastic, I almost think it's a little bit distracting from the bigger issues of getting systemic change, like banning single-use plastic and working to engineer all other alternatives.
That's why I think a lot of our issues in our society are based on one thing, which is mass consumerism.
Yeah.
And which really started in like the 50s, 40s, 50s.
Totally.
Where it was like products and they're cheap and like everyone can have them, and everything's made out of plastic now because it's cheaper.
Yeah.
And just like that on-demand feeling of our food, of our medicine, of our anything that we need. We just go to the department store.
Yeah.
And
that was a huge revolution.
Yeah, and I think that we're kind of coming out of it, but it's hard because it's become such a bad habit and we've become so dependent on it.
And our generation was raised that way.
Exactly. But I think it's going to be a really hard thing to dismantle, but it's definitely not impossible. I think that's the obvious path we're on. But I mean, I think I've realized that if you look at any society throughout history, you can tell their priority based on what the biggest buildings were dedicated to. Like in ancient civilizations, it was spiritual buildings, like temples, or where the palace of royalty was. And now it's like department stores. Like they're huge, and like shopping malls. And I think that just
Yeah.
shows like that is our false idol right now. Or it was. I think it's like kind of
Yeah.
past its peak.
Yeah.
But it's so hard to shake.
Yeah. And it's just such a big part of our culture.
It's huge.
So I get so frustrated all the time because where I live in Rancho Santa Margarita area, that's like the foothill ranches of Saddleback Mountain. So it's east of the coast of California for anyone who doesn't know where that is. Yeah. So essentially, this neighborhood that I live in, if you drive for like 20 minutes in circles, it's like the only community centers
Yeah.
or like crafted downtowns or just strip malls.
Yeah.
That
It's like the
all
only
have
place to meet.
Yeah, that have chain stores essentially. So then to meet and congregate where other people are, you have to be going to a store and have to have a
Spending
destination
money,
and
buying
spending
something.
money. And like the only place you could really think of where like people are kind of connecting, because you don't really connect to people who are just in the grocery store.
Yeah.
You could go to a restaurant and maybe talk to some random people, but you're still totally having to spend money.
Yeah. So, we had just now some audio difficulties, but it only fricked up about 5 minutes of our conversation, which
back.
was mainly about technology and echo chambers.
Yeah.
So,
Yeah.
I think. Okay, what were we gonna?
Well, let's just start. Why don't we tell our relationships with technology?
Yeah.
Let's describe our relationships with technology. You have a business that relies upon technology and social media in particular.
Yeah.
I also, a lot of the work that I'm doing is on social media in a sort of advocacy realm.
I think what was interesting, was a good way we started with your class and how they talked about echo chambers.
Yes.
Because we mentioned echo chambers and how it's frustrating to feel like, okay, we're making progress, the people around me, the people I see on Instagram care about these things, and then maybe just going out into the world and realizing the majority of people are still very unaware or don't care.
And are just hearing different information.
Yeah.
That's literally hearing different information, seeing different content fed different things on social media.
I met a guy on 4th of July that we were having this great conversation. And then he hits me with the like, oh, I'm so glad that you're a young person and you're a thinker because social media, blah, blah, blah. And it's like, climate change, like, that's not real. Like, why would they change the term from global warming to climate change? And I was like, what are you talking about?
Oh, man.
Oh, my gosh. But yeah, you mentioned that at your class, they covered that topic.
Yeah, so we're thinking about post-truth. And how we're living in the post-truth era. And so essentially, the post-truth era is not specifically defined just by the fact that we don't look at true information as much as we used to. It's also based on the idea that social media gives us information and we take it as truth, and that we let our emotions generally dictate what type of information we are more willing to trust.
Yeah, alternative facts.
Alternative facts. Yeah, so we talk a lot about echo chambers, and if you guys don't know what that is, it's essentially the idea that on social media you are being fed information by the people that you're surrounded with, and those people are surrounded by the same information, but it's just like preaching to the choir.
Yeah, it's like you're fed information that they know you already like, so you're not really seeing anything new. And
you're not getting an accurate like diversification of information that you would in the real world, such as going to a party and actually talking to someone, or going to a coffee shop.
Yeah.
You know what I mean?
Having a in-person connection. I think that's what causes a lot of the aggression we see now in disagreements. Yeah. And has like divided people so much more, is the disconnect we feel from person to person online. and we don't get a sense of who they are, what their values are, maybe why they feel that way.
Yeah. And we are constantly just like confirmed on social media because, again, you're like fed information that the algorithm thinks you're already going to like.
Yeah.
And so we're not used to seeing people with different ideas and having that like healthy disagreement.
And
so in the real
also-
world, when we do find people with differing ideas, we're like, whoa, I don't know what to do with you.
Exactly.
I don't agree with you.
Yeah, you just get angry at them. And also just being like, once you start following people that think a certain way, I think you start finding more and more radical people that might be more
Yeah.
angry or aggressive, or polarized. And so that starts getting normalized.
Yeah.
And a lot of people are really angry and are willing to like act in very unacceptable ways
Yeah.
instead of using communication. And there's also so much ego involved,
Yeah.
like being a part of this group and like who's gonna be more intense.
Yeah.
It
Yeah.
gets crazy.
Yeah. Yeah. So I kind of got to this point where I was like, social media is fake. If I'm going to be posting on social media, like I want it to be stuff that's impactful. And I care about the environment. I'm just going to try to dedicate my content to that because I'd rather just actually talk to a friend about my life and share those photos of like personal photos about my life with friends who are I'm really close to. And so I started posting more about environmental ideas, but with that, I was worried about being put into an echo chamber and my content only being given to people who already think about climate change and already know that there's environmental problems happening.
Because that's not the purpose of it.
Right. And so I was trying to find a way to like approach my content enough to where I wouldn't be like, I don't know, offending any other people or just coming from a very curious place.
Yeah, curiosity, neutrality.
Yeah.
Not necessarily neutrality, but like just being
And not judgmental.
Yeah.
In terms of like, oh, you don't know about this information? That's so cool. I just recently learned about this. I'm also curious and here's this information.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Mhm.
I think it's important to also like have accountability of what you post on social media so that you're not spreading misinformation.
Yes.
So
definitely.
I've definitely had a bit of imposter syndrome starting to post about environmental stuff because I don't want to come across as like a foo-foo advocate or literally spread misinformation.
Yeah.
And
It's a big responsibility.
it is a responsibility. I try to think of it as such, and I think that everybody has a responsibility. Nowadays, it's so easy to repost a post on your story.
Yeah.
And I think that people repost infographics so mindlessly. It's
Yeah.
ridiculous.
It's just like, oh, let me do this, and then people will know that I care about this.
Yeah, let me advocate for something by reposting it on my story, which I think sharing information and standing by something is really important, but I also think people should fact check and maybe learn a little bit more when they come across an infographic on Instagram.
Yeah, I've realized throughout this time of new wave politics blended with technology and Instagram, specifically marked by the BLM protests, when we were limited because of COVID. So pretty much so much of it was on Instagram.
Yeah.
And people not using it, people not posting about their personal lives, infographics coming around. That I feel like the point I've come to now is that you don't have to post about anything if you aren't informed.
Yeah.
Like nobody's like people sometimes there was a point where people were like, why are you being silent about this? And it's like, why is my voice only on here? Like that's just kind of assuming that my voice is specifically tied to my Instagram account.
Yeah.
I'm probably like I could be having a lot of conversations about this, very important conversations about this. I could be working on a huge essay right now, you know, you don't know.
Yeah.
And so you don't have to and you shouldn't be posting about things that you don't know about, that you aren't well versed on. I think a lot of people that I follow have helped me understand this when it's like sometimes it's actually like very offensive for people to have their political movements or national catastrophes to be reduced to a bunch of kids in the US reposting about it, feeling like they're doing something. Like,
Yeah.
that's actually offensive, you know?
This really makes me think of the Palestine and Israel
Yeah,
conflict.
specifically, yeah.
Yeah, during that point in time, I was working really hard on a project with my environmental studies professor, and I was like, I simply don't have the time to try to understand this conflict. I have a very limited understanding of what's happening. Everybody is posting about it on social media. I want to take all those posts that I'm seeing with a grain of salt and not repost anything before I
it's like,
have
why
the
do you have to
time.
repost something? Like,
Yeah.
you're not impacted, you're not there, and it doesn't mean you shouldn't care about it. You should definitely go learn about it.
Right.
But it's like, why does your voice even matter in this situation?
Yeah.
In the nicest way possible.
Yeah.
Like, you don't have to say something right now.
Yeah, especially if you don't understand it. Especially, like, don't just do it because you're trying to prove that you're an advocate or you're aware or you take a stance.
Yeah. I think that a big part of that is just our connection with our social media personalities. It's like accepting and remembering we are not our Instagram personality.
Yeah.
Like, I don't have to post about something for people to know I'm aware of it.
Yeah.
If you're near me, if you're in my presence, we might have a conversation about it, and you'll see how much I know about it.
Yeah.
And that's just like remembering to be a real human being first.
Yeah. Yeah, I love this idea of Instagram personalities because I've been meeting way more of your friends, and throughout quarantine, I was super strict with quarantine, but just generally you see people on social media, and then when you meet them in real person, it always feels like, oh, whoa, you're a real person, and like I know things about you even though I've never met you. Yeah. And sometimes I can feel a bit creepy in that sense, but it's happened to me where like I've had a few people be like, oh, I feel like I've been hanging out with you so much, or like seeing so much about you because you've been posting on social media. So I definitely try to be as authentic as possible. But you can't be a slave to it. Like, I originally started this environmental content with Live Earth Day 365, which was this idea that I was going to post a reel every single day.
You did it for a while, too.
I did it for like 20 days, and this was during finals. I don't know how the hell I pulled it off. It really showed me that, like, you could do whatever you really want to do if you have the motivation. But I was like, I'm a human. I cannot be slave to like posting a video every single day.
Yeah. Because it's like, if you're not taking care of yourself, if you're not healthy, then your message and your mission isn't going to be clear.
Yeah, and I'm going to fumble with the content that I post because I'm probably not going to fact check it as well, and I'm going to be stressed and like, yeah. So this really goes back to like, if you're trying to advocate for something, advocate for your own mental health first.
Yeah.
And then extend yourself in a supportive way to whatever movement you're really passionate about.
It's exactly like when you're on an airplane and they say put your face mask on first and then help others. Totally. Because if you die, no one's going to help your kids.
Yes, yeah. You can't help others if you're not helping yourself first.
I think something else that I remember sharing during the part of our audio that turned into like Alvin and the Chipmunks was just like the way that I see social media and my relationship to it. And something that I wasn't really aware of, but that I voiced and you found interesting, was the idea of followers and leaders on social media, and how that they already exist in our world. But social media definitely accentuates and amplifies who's who and feeds those things. I mentioned how I found that with my bigger and longer had account, I don't see as many ads, and I kind of get whatever I want a lot easier. Whereas with my newer and accounts with less followers that I may start, there's way more ads. And to me that shows that they have a clear distinction of who's their followers and people who really just like consume content, and then who are people who create content. And I think that my main account is put under the category of someone who creates content, and so they don't want me to have a negative experience because I bring people to the platform, keep them entertained, and so they don't give me ads as much so that I have a better experience. Whereas with my smaller accounts, there's way more ads, because if you're seen as a follower and somebody who's just a consumer, they don't care about your mental health, and they're just feeding you way more ads because they can. And I think that shows our relationship with social media and how we need to be very aware that we are the product and that our attention is the
Yeah.
product, and they profit more off of our negative habits and our shorter attention spans. So bottom line, it's really just up to us and our own self-discipline to use social media in the way that we want it to be in our lives, because sadly they don't give us the option to customize our experience.
Yeah.
I don't want to see stories. I don't want to see things all the time. I don't want an explore page. I don't want a shopping page. I don't want a reels page. I don't want any of that. But of course they're not going to give that to us, because that's like
the product they're selling.
Yeah, it's our attention on those things. And so it's totally up to us to use it as we would like to use it, because at the end of the day, every time we deprive ourselves of it, I think, at least for me, I come back to the realization that it is a very positive and impactful tool.
Yeah.
If it's used in the right way.
Right.
And I feel like so many of us are like, okay, well, what's the balance? Like, how do I do it? And it's like, you've just got to work on yourself.
Yeah.
Sadly, it's really just up to you. You're all alone in this.
Yeah. And it's really hard because that takes a lot of willpower.
So much.
And especially on these platforms, they're banking on the fact that you don't have enough willpower to get away from the phone. I mean, they make social media extremely addictive in the way that, like, gambling is. Mm-hmm. You know, that's a really big system of entertainment that is hard to have the willpower up against. Mm-hmm. And I've thought about that in my own work. It's like, I'm not going to say I hate myself. I love myself. But I am most ashamed of myself when I accidentally spend way too much time on social media.
Yes.
You know what I mean? I'm ashamed of how I've spent my time, and I can't believe, like, hours will pass and I'll be like, oh my God, I've been on social media for hours. Yeah. And so as someone who's, like, now quote unquote creating content, although it is relating to the environment, which I think is really important, I definitely have thought about the impact my content will create, and I don't want to be a part of this system that's like getting people hooked to social media. Yeah. You know what I mean? But then again, it's like, if everybody's on social media, maybe it is the perfect place to be advocating for the environment and using it really as a tool. Yeah. And so I think there just has to be that balance. And more recently, like, when I do post things, sometimes the captions will be like, get off your phone, social media sucks. Yes. You'll thank me later, get off your phone, goodbye.
Yeah. I always end a lot of my projects or books like that.
Yeah.
Like, okay, go
and
outside.
Now go outside.
Yeah. I end the podcast almost every single time by asking people to go outside too.
I love that.
Yeah, I think it reminds me a lot, many things today remind me a lot of this, but specifically social media, of like movies or cartoons where everyone would be hypnotized, or maybe the main character is hypnotized and they have to fight against it, and it takes like a lot of energy and a lot of willpower. And I always would wonder, like, would I be able to do that, you know? And I feel like this is that time.
You do it every day.
Yeah.
You do it every time you open up Instagram.
Exactly, or get off of it and realize, oh my God, I've been on this for so long. And I think I've noticed it's a huge turnoff for me if people are on their phone all the time and don't mind it.
Yeah.
You know what I mean? Like,
me too. And the pandemic and quarantine has accelerated that so much. Yeah. Like, for me, I was living with my grandparents, and so I wasn't seeing hardly anyone during the pandemic. And I'm happy with those decisions, but like, I spent way more time on social media because of it. And now that I've been hanging out with more people, I noticed, like, I have not been on my phone when I'm with somebody else at all. Yeah. I'm never on my phone when I'm with somebody else.
Exactly.
And I think it's like, people crave social interaction. They really do.
And it sucks because it makes me beat myself up. It's like, okay, why when I'm with these people or outside doing something, I'm not on my phone? Why can't I, like, keep that ball rolling when I'm on my own? Like, and fulfill that space and time and energy. Like, why can't I pick up a book or start a project? And I definitely think, like, let's not be so hard on ourselves. But I know so many people that have absolutely no problem spending the whole, like, hours on their phone. Like, it's just normal. And it's just like, they enjoy it. Like,
yeah.
and they're not, and it's not like I want people to be ashamed.
Yeah, I usually feel guilty
Yeah,
on
and I
my
don't
own
want people
accord.
to feel bad, but it's like scary when like
Yeah.
there's no problem with this. It's like,
Yeah.
yes, there is.
There is a problem.
Uh,
Get off your phone, go outside.
yeah.
I hope to the people who are listening to this that you're outside or doing something while you're listening to this and not just scrolling.
Yeah. And if you are scrolling right now, maybe like go on a walk.
And continue listening.
Breathe.
Yes, breathe. Remember to breathe.
So, with your ventures of environmentalism, what would you say you've noticed since you've been putting yourself out there in that way? In maybe like your interactions on social media, or maybe motivations within yourself. How do you feel like it's impacted your experience?
Yeah, that's a beautiful question. It's way less self-centered. It's not about me. It's about the messages I'm trying to put out there. And people seem to really appreciate it. I've had a lot of people come up to me and be like, thank you for talking about the environment. More people need to be doing it.
Yeah.
And like, if I'm not directly making an impact in some way, at least I'm hopefully starting a conversation or taking up space by talking about the environment.
Yeah.
I think that is enough sometimes.
Yeah. Being a messenger is a noble thing.
Yeah, it's quite fun, and not in a biblical way am I a messenger in any way, but I'm just like trying to talk about these things, because it's really important and it affects all of us.
Yeah. And how do you feel like your venture on making it fun and artistic has gone? What kind of things, because maybe somebody isn't familiar with what you're doing, so what kind of things have you been venturing in? What do you find easy? What do you find hard?
Yeah. Okay. So I originally started with Live Earth Day 365, making a reel every single day, directly in service to our environment. So I definitely think that you need to fall in love with the environment in order to want to protect it. Because again, like as humans, we want to protect what we love. I've already deeply fallen in love with like the outdoors and nature, and so I want to do my best with that. But I've also come to the realization that like it isn't just enough to be in love with the outdoors. Like you have to take extra steps to really advocate for it.
Yeah.
And so originally I was like, I want my videos to specifically be about things you can do every single day in service of the environment. And making that commitment to myself of trying to do it for an entire year really motivated me to like every single day, okay, what am I going to do as a video? And so content planning was really helpful in that, but I was also like in the middle of finals, so it was really difficult. And I eventually got to the space where I was working on another really big environmental video project with the head of my department of environmental studies at my college, which I'm really excited about and can continue to talk about later. But I was like, okay.
And that's just like a personal thing?
Yeah, it's a personal project.
Awesome.
Yeah, and this project goes with the idea that I wanted to have approachable content about the environment.
Yeah.
So we can talk about it now. Essentially, my professor has a survey that you can take, and this is based on years of him teaching environmental studies. And his approach essentially is asking students to think about their own values as they approach environmental studies. So like when I first went to college, I was like, oh man, everybody just wants to save the earth, like teach me how to do it, you know? And then I got there and my professor was like, well, actually think about yourself and what you're interested in, your own values, and then think about how you can apply them to environmentalism. So for example, are you more future-minded, or do you think of the past more in terms of how we're going to solve solutions today? When you do think about the future, do you think you're more crisis-oriented, or are you more optimistic? Are you more technophilic, or are you more technophobic? These are things we've definitely been talking about today in this conversation. And so there's a survey that will help you examine your own ideas by answering statements. But these videos that we're creating is essentially examining these ideas. And so I've interviewed like 9 people over the summer, and they're each hour-long interviews. So pray for me. I really need to edit that still. It's gonna be like at least 9 hours of work. Yeah. I'm really excited though. So essentially, in these videos, I'm asking the audience, are you more future-minded or do you think more about the past? And then showing and highlighting these students who have their own ideas and opinions, and recognizing that all of our ideas exist within a spectrum of ideas, and not everything is wrong. It just means that you might be more inclined to different ideas
and
than
everybody
others.
has to fulfill a different role
Yeah.
within the same mission.
Yes, and that goes back to the idea of like bringing your artistic expression into your environmental work. Like if you love drawing, you can draw about turtles and draw about environmental realms and advocate in that sense. Or if you're a writer, use those skills. Like cultivate any skills you have. Like there is a place for you within the environmental realm.
Yeah. And how do you feel like putting yourself out there in this way and portraying yourself in this way has impacted your social life? Like, do you feel alienated in any way? Has it brought a new sphere of people around?
Yeah, that's a really interesting question. Truth be told, I started posting these videos during quarantine, and I think that was extremely helpful for me because I wasn't like connected to a social network of people for an entire year.
You're not worried,
essentially.
like, who is this person gonna, like, what are they gonna think about me? 'Cause
Yeah,
it's like, I'm literally all by myself.
I just didn't give a crap. I was like, I care about the environment. I'm making this video. Maybe some people will see it. This is awesome. Now that I've been hanging out with more people, I'm still really proud of the work that I've done, but I also feel myself second guessing my work a little bit more.
Right, like you're more aware of maybe how people will
perceive it,
view you.
Yeah. But I think that's beautiful too, because then it promotes accountability, which I think is important.
More connected to your audience.
Yeah, more connected and your content, because you're a little more worried about like what kind of content you're creating. And when I was doing a video every single day, my main goal was to have good content, but also a driving force was like get a video out every single day. And so I would rush myself a little bit, which honestly was really nice in some sense, because it made me not think about judging myself enough. I would judge myself more if I didn't have a video for the day than I would judge myself like looking in the video. I think just be a vessel, like be authentically a vessel for whatever you're passionate about.
Yeah, that's so important. I think that's a big part of the idea of the eternal student.
Yes,
is like curiosity, and then being able to tune in within yourself to those passions, educate yourself, or get skilled in whatever it is. And then being a channel that then is able to express it in a digestible, approachable way. It takes a lot of work, but like I said, I think it's very noble work. It's very authentic. It's very impactful and real. Like it's not superficial in any way, because you're just trying to put forth a message that is meaningful to your heart. And that's why people resonate with it, is because they're like, oh, this is meaningful to my heart as well. And it's interesting because, at least for me in my individual life, like dated and having a marketplace and writing a book and having the study and making events, like when I explain this to people, especially adults, it's always like, oh my gosh, like, wow.
Whoa,
but I'm not really thinking
doing?
of myself as like this super sick, because it's not like I like make a bunch of money. I'm still like in the very early processes of it. I do believe it'll be something successful,
and it is successful now.
And it is through the connections that I make, and that I'm able to like facilitate with my work. But all of them are all very authentic. They come from a need that I see in the world. Like, I have a belief that, like we mentioned earlier, a big problem with our world is, like, a big underlying issue with a lot of the issues we see is mass consumerism. And so I've come to the realization that the solution to that is like smaller artisan communities and the exchange of goods through independent artists and makers. And so I created and curate the marketplace, the Dated Market, where independent artists, I curate and stock and sell and market and ship their work so that it's more accessible, you know? Like, you don't have to go looking through Instagram to find people. Because when I say artisan communities, at first I was very confused because I was like, when I realized that that was the answer, because it's like, well, we're already in such a globalized world. We're not going to go back to like small little communities in the hillside
Yeah.
where everyone's specialized. Like, that's just not going to happen. And so I realized that it's through a connection with technology, and that's how we're able to find people. And communities that are on the ground are able to stay connected with each other and support each other. And that's another big goal of mine, is to like co-facilitate networks for communities and collectives that are stand by the same mission, but like the only thing separating them is space.
Yeah.
You know, and so like communities that are fighting for the same things throughout the world should be connected and able to support each other. Also, my belief that art and important messages have a difficult place in technology because everything is behind the same sized device.
Yeah.
So even if something is a stupid ass meme or a very important new environmental thing or like some incredible piece of art, it's all like minimized to the same exact format.
Yeah.
And I think that's a big disservice to important art, important messages.
That's a wonderful point.
Yeah, and so that's why I gravitate to print so much, and I've made like I'm on my like 5th print project.
Yeah.
Because and I want to keep helping others make their print projects.
Yeah. And I love that when you were writing your book, you catered to the fact that we have really short attention spans.
Yeah, without trying to like underestimate the intellect of the audience, which was very hard to do.
Yeah, that's a beautiful balance, though, I think. It's like, I think in that sense, you're really supporting the reader.
Yes.
You're like, I know you are so smart and you're capable of digesting this information, but let me give you multiple different ways of digesting this information so that you can pick and choose which speaks to you the best.
Supporting the reader is a really good way of thinking about it, because when I started writing, I was like, okay, I know exactly what I want to say, and I started writing, and I was like, wait, how do I say it? Because if I talk about like me, and I, then I'm kind of just ignoring the audience. And if I talk about you, then I'm kind of like talking down to them, as in like, you need to do this, you know? And it's like, so I realized that I needed to write in a we format, so everything is collective and inviting, rather than I went through this. And because I realized in my experience reading, if I'm reading something that somebody wrote about themselves, or they're expressing a message and they wrote it in a very like I and you format, it almost like pisses me off, even if what they're saying is really beautiful, because it's like, well, I experienced that too, you know what I mean? Like, I had like, I don't know, if somebody starts talking about like their beautiful way of thinking, it's like, okay, well, I think that way too, you know? It's like, you're not so special, like, just like this angry person inside of me. And so it's like, I don't want to alienate the audience in that way, where it's like, oh, I'm just this magical smart girl, you know? It's like, we all have this inside of us, and that's the whole purpose of the book, and is to get people to like see their value, and like, that's the mission of Dated, is guiding inner revolution. You can't do that if you put yourself on a pedestal and like talk to the other people around you as if they're there to learn from you. Even though that is the case, but it's like anyone else could be up here speaking, you know, and I'd listen to them. So how do you create that environment, you know? I think it's about collective and community language, being aware of the language you're using. And also co-creating. I try to make everything that I participate in something I'm participating in, not something I'm solely creating, you know? Like the events, it would be so much more pressure on me, and it would probably allow for a lot of ego if I try to do everything on my own. So I try to keep a lot of space for like, okay, we need this, who can participate in that? Like, we need volunteers, like, who's gonna come help? And like, we all just have a great time and experience this together. Whereas I could and have done it in ways where it's like, okay, I'm putting this on, and I'm going to figure everything out, and then you guys are just here to experience that. You know? And it's so much more impactful when everyone feels like they can, if they would like to, be a big part of it. And it's like, you meet new people, and you have help, and create a community. And,
that's so beautiful. Yes, and people like rally behind your community because they like being a part of it, and they like collaborating with it. Like, I took a lot of pride when you wanted me to be on this podcast, for one, but also wanted me to be in your market. Like, it's lovely. And, like, you're supporting those other artists by validating their work to a certain extent and actually helping, like, to get them paid and sell their work.
Yeah.
You know?
That's a really big thing about how we need to shift our commercial interactions in the world.
Yeah.
Is I would love to, I mean, within Dated, I would love for it to grow into a community, in a situation where people are able to be financially supported by living their truth and, like, doing what they're good at.
Yeah.
Like, if you're a great speaker, like, let's make you a podcast, you know? Like, if you're good at making this, we'll sell it, you know? Like, creating an environment and in a community where you're supported if you're willing to put in the work and have the discipline to do it and are talented, you know, like, you shouldn't have to subdue those parts of yourself to survive in this world. Yeah. And that's what community's all about, is, like, we can do this together. So I feel like my role is, like, creating the little foundations for that so we can all do those things. Yeah. Because that's the world that we need to be living in, is one where people are able to follow their hearts and live their truth, so that they're not living in fear, and they can fulfill their missions no matter what it is, and they know that they're going to be supported, and that they just, knowing their worth, knowing their value, these things are so important. And it's like, people don't believe in themselves to the point that they'll, like, fight people on it. Yeah. You know, like, it'll be like, no, like, this has value. Like, you need to do something with this. Like, you can support yourself this way. And people, like, are just so shut off. They don't want to, like, believe that they can do something like that because it's scary. Yeah. And we need to feel safe following our hearts. Yeah. Yeah. And, have community to do it with. Yeah.
Going back to the idea of, like, having a lot of environmental anxiety, I think part of what can help get rid of that is realizing that as the individual, you need to be a part of the community. Yeah. And so I think I should also take this time to say that I am by no means an expert within environmental studies. Yeah. Like, I'm a freshman going into my sophomore year of
that's
college.
That's what eternal student is all about.
Yes. And,
it's like I'm sharing my curiosity.
Exactly. And it's such a myth that, like, once you graduate high school or college, that you're just going to know everything and you're going to stop learning. Like, the second you graduate, you're going to keep learning just as much as you were when you were in college, eternal, just different things.
Is eternal.
Exactly, which was why I was like, okay, I care about the environment now. I'm going to start posting stuff now, not wait till I'm graduated, because I have value now.
Exactly, and when you're a student, you're actively learning and receiving information that's very fresh in your mind, and you have ideas about it. And so it's like, that's a potent time to share that. Right. That's where my most recent book came from, is like, I was a student in philosophy as a philosophy major just for 1 year, and I knew it was only going to be for 1 year. Long story, I think I shared it in the first episode. But I was like, okay, even though I'm not going to, like, get a degree in this, and I don't know everything there is to know, this experience of learning these things has been so impactful. Yeah. That's still a valuable thing to share.
With my work and both of our work, it sounds like we're trying to use our voices, but also getting other people to rally behind it and also inspire other people. So, like, within the environmental realm, I think it's really not a good idea to be like, I'm this environmental queen, follow me. And
market yourself in a certain way.
Yeah, and you don't want to be like a leader or like a god of a revolution. I don't think that's good, especially with, like, climate change, something that's affecting everybody and something that we're all a little bit responsible for. Yeah. You know, I don't think it's an idea to say, like, I'm the movement leader. By no means am I an expert. I am just someone who is passionate. I want to keep myself accountable, but I also realize each individual video I make is not going to make a huge impact, but if it has enough impact to inspire other people to also become aware of the environment, I think that community building is really important.
Yeah, because I think a lot of people put themselves in a trap because they feel like, okay, I have a message to share, I'm going to share it through social media. Yeah. And then they feel like they need to brand themselves and market themselves and, like, do all these things, which I feel like, if you're, like, a life coach or a financial coach, advisor person, that makes a lot more sense. But if the message you're trying to share comes from the heart, that should be enough.
Yeah.
And, like, you yourself, like, people want to connect with an individual.
Yeah.
And you're enough. And you
you
don't
are
have
your
to...
own brand, too.
Yeah. You don't have to, like...
create a brand. Like, just be authentic.
Exactly. And, like, okay, I need to post this on Mondays and this on Tuesdays and, like, a little inspirational quote on Thursdays. Like, it's because it just seems too calculated.
Yeah.
And people then feel like they have to be... Like, when you present yourself in that way, you trap yourself because you then aren't able to, like, be unsure of something because you've spent all this time presenting yourself as someone who's very sure of
a certain
something.
way. Yes, a certain way.
Yeah, and that's why I love being an eternal student and spreading that, because it's all about being curious and knowing that you don't know anything.
Yeah.
And it's like, okay, well, I'm learning about this, so I'm going to share this with you. Like, what are you learning about?
Yeah.
And, like, what are you curious about? This is what I'm curious about. Like, let's just have a conversation and share what we do know, what we are aware of.
Yeah.
I visualize it as, like, a quilt of knowledge. And, like, the more perspectives you get in there, like, the more 3D it is.
Yummy. Yes.
Yeah. Instead of just, like, one little point. Like, you get, like, a whole matrix of...
Yes.
Perspectives.
Ah, damn it. And then if it's like a social media echo chamber,
damn it,
it's like only one. You're like only one colored quilt.
Yes.
Only one thread is in your quilt.
Definitely.
But you just like integrate all those diverse colors and thoughts and yes.
That's why it's so important. I feel like to stop being so angry, even though a lot of anger is very justified. We have the power to tune into ourselves and, like, use practices to calm ourselves down. And of course, we shouldn't tolerate intolerance.
Yeah.
But we need to be understanding and open to the people around us. Like, specifically with something very broad is, like, the political climate. When Trump was president, there was a lot of stuff that happened, and
an understatement.
Yeah, a lot of things happened during that time. And I think the more liberal side, the more progressive side was very quick to classify, because of the kind of stuff that got shared and went viral of the behavior on the right. It was very easy to classify them as, like, stupid idiots that are uneducated and overweight and live in the middle of the country and, like, just like a lot of stereotypes that are gonna be hurtful to those people and make them angrier, you know, like,
just divide them even more.
Yeah, and they're gonna feel victimized. It's like, the truth is, infrastructure, education, money that is invested into things, those are all going into LA, New York areas.
Yeah.
If you are privileged enough to see that, you should be not just educate in a way where it's, like, telling people what they don't know, but, like, invite people to learn with you, you know?
And educate yourself on other people's ideas.
Yeah, and their experiences. Because it's like, the truth is, our world, the United States is a really big country. It's bigger than most countries, and our world is huge, and it's very common and normal for countries to be very different from each other.
Yeah.
Europe, a lot of Europe, except Russia, is pretty much the size of the United States, and they're so varied.
Yeah.
So we need to accept our variations.
Yeah.
We have so many different experiences.
Yeah.
This country is huge.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Totally. I think recognizing that everybody lives within a different echo chamber is so important. Like,
different worldviews.
Different worldviews and different information and just different spheres. It's
like different spheres, different layers of the spiral. There's this model of this called spiral dynamics, and it's basically this model which is a spiral, and it's, like, representing different worldviews and different levels of worldviews that have different priorities, different beliefs, different missions, and there's even models that show, like, which percentages of our world population are operating in these worldviews, and they can be reflected in, like, a human's growth. They can be represented through humanity's growth, just, like, a different perspective of the world. And a lot of people right now are operating in one that's very, like, in between the ones that are very, like, religious and emotional based on traditional values, and like that's where most people are still in, kind of like the post indoctrination of the church.
Yeah.
And then also people like that are being pioneered by Elon Musk, where it's like science and like we're gonna like just like a rejection of religion for progression in science, which is good, but it's still not touching on truth and like connection.
Interesting. Yeah.
Those are higher worldviews that a lot of people are in, but it's definitely not the majority of the population.
Yeah.
And until we, what's interesting is a big characteristic of the people in the higher worldviews, which is in quotes because it's not supposed to be like higher or lower.
Yeah.
But people that are in like the compassionate humanitarian worldview, a big key factor and trademark of those people is that they are able to see the value of everyone's role. Like they see that everyone in everyone in all the worldviews is fulfilling their role. They're doing exactly what makes sense to them. They're doing what they have the tools to do. They're not angry that everyone isn't with them, you know? And that's a big characteristic of people that are change makers and are able to ever convince anyone's mind. Like you can't change someone's perspective if you yell at them.
Yeah.
And I think a big thing that happened with Instagram politics was like, I don't need to educate you. Like, you have Google, you know?
Yeah.
And it's like, okay, so we're going to substitute human conversations with going on the internet? Like, that's not good.
Which has their own, like, algorithms to begin with. Not everybody, like, receives the same information when they Google something. And going back to this idea of, like, everybody living in their own spheres, I really hesitate to, like, get frustrated with people for not knowing about environmental problems.
Yeah.
And the problems that we face, because it's, like, that information wasn't in your sphere.
Yeah,
not
like you
to
went
say
to
that my
school
sphere
to
is
study
better.
Yeah.
It's just that I'm studying this and I care about the environment to begin with, and so I research it, you know?
And also, yeah, I'm vegan. So as a vegan, I know in detail the positives and the benefits not only on my body but on the world, and like how awful the animal agriculture industry is, how impactful it is on the environment. And honestly, there is no excuse for people not to be aware of those things because the information is everywhere. People just choose not to look at it because it's hard to look at.
Yeah.
And it makes no sense to be angry at someone for that or to treat somebody bad for that. I was in the same boat for a long time. And I definitely don't think everyone should be vegan because different cultures, different parts of the world live in different ways. But I definitely believe that in the United States, like, there is no reason to not be more conscious of what you're consuming. If it's not just even with your food, but with everything. It's like we have the option to get a more thoughtful and considerate option.
Yeah.
So we don't, like, we can go to the supermarket and we have any decision we want. Yeah. And so it's like, why not do the one that's more environmentally considerate, you know? A lot of people will say it's more expensive. It isn't always. Yeah. Especially with veganism, it's more expensive if you're going out and getting, like, fake meat and cheese wherever you go. But, like, really what you're doing is when you go to the store, you're getting, what, vegetables, grains, meat, cheese. What you're doing is just taking out the meat and cheese, which is going to be the most expensive part.
Right.
And just get more grains and vegetables, you know? And so with things like that, like, for me, in my mind, it's very easy and understandable, and it's like, I could be mad about it, like, why doesn't everyone get this? But it's like, the truth is, not everyone cares. Yeah. And if you're gonna drive yourself crazy if you're mad about that. Yeah. Like, all you can do is, like, my biggest thing is lead by example, without attachment. Yeah. Lead by example, do your thing, and don't expect people to follow in your footsteps or to be amazed by you, but just, like, do your thing, and that way you're an example, and people that are interested can see you as an inspiration and, like, go to you for questions. And in that way, you're serving your purpose just by living what you want to do to the fullest, you know?
That's so beautiful, yes.
And I think you're doing that in a really amazing way.
I'm blushing. Oh, thank you. I really appreciate that.
Yeah, I think we've hit a lot of good topics.
We have so much. Yeah, it's so good.
We're at an hour 15 now.
Beautiful.
So people have been listening.
Yeah, thank
for a
you so
while.
much for listening.
Yes, thank you for listening to us.
Well, I suppose then with this episode of this podcast, if you've learned anything,
Yes.
I mean, you must have had new information come at you. So take what you have soaked up in your sponge of a brain and put it forth within whatever inspires you in the work that you do.
Yes.
And that's how you can join the conversation.
Exactly.
Yeah.
Express yourself in whatever way you want to. And even if you didn't hear anything new, maybe you were inspired by something.
Yeah.
And we encourage you to follow that inspiration to something that isn't just an Instagram post. Don't sell yourself short. Maybe you want to like write in your journal or like write an essay.
Sing a song.
If you write something, you can submit it to us too.
Oh my gosh, yes. At Eliad@stated.com.
Yes. Yeah, exactly. You
Really?
know my email. It is
That's
Eliad@stated.com. That's hilarious.
That's amazing.
Yeah, and it wouldn't be the end of the episode if we didn't ask you to go outside.
Yes.
Even if you were
I'm all,
like,
first
I'm not
follow
gonna
me.
do that.
First follow me on
Yes.
Instagram at
Follow her. Follow Liv. What is it? Liv.
It
dot
is
Ladaire.
liv.ladaire. Ladaire is Ladaire.
Yes.
Now go outside.
Yeah, now go outside. Even if you feel like you don't want to listen to these two girls telling you to go outside and you're like, I already went outside today, or like, I don't really want to, you're not going to regret it.
You're not going to regret it.
Like, it's not like you're going to go out there and experience the air and the world and the sky and the clouds and the trees and the grass. And
even
be like,
the city
"Ugh."
and the streets
Yes,
and the...
true.
Yes, like get a glass of water, get your shoes on.
Yeah, get your shoes on. That's
Just
hard
go for
sometimes.
a stroll. I mean, you could even just go sit outside.
Yeah.
We could go sit in your alleyway, Eli.
Yeah, that's something hard. Going outside for me has been like cement and tractors because I live in an industrial area in a warehouse.
Which some people would argue is still part of nature, but that's another conversation.
Cement? People be saying that?
Well, it's a conversation of what
like,
you define as
technically
nature. Because
but
it is like, if you think it's naturally created or not. Because
I feel like that's a very silly argument because obviously it is. Everything comes from nature, but it's like,
Right.
it's not filling your soul. It's not growing.
Yes.
But I've created like a raised bed planter outside that I'm able to... I've been growing edible food in, and there's a chair next to it. So my nature is literally just like sitting next to the plants and like touching the soil and like looking up at the clouds.
I love that.
But it's hard because there's people like working on cars nearby, and they're like, "You meditating? Like, what's up?" And I'm like, "Hey."
There's nothing worse than someone coming up to you while you're trying to meditate and be like, "Yo, what you meditated about,
my
huh? You
God.
meditating?"
Like, side note, my hate for men was at its peak in high school. I don't hate men. I love everyone. But I was so pissed because anytime I'd go into nature, like read or write, some dude thinks he can come up to me and be like, "What are you reading? What are you writing about?" And I'm like, I'm doing something. Like, you wouldn't do that to anyone. You just think I'm pretty. Like, fuck you. Oh my God.
That's so funny.
Yeah, like, don't interrupt people while they're reading or writing.
But go outside and be the person who's reading or writing outside.
Yeah, and it's like, I feel like you can sit next to them and wait till they're done. I don't know.
Yeah.
Unless you're a guy and they're a young girl. Don't do it.
Yes.
Oh.
Okay.
Okay.
Okay. Well, thank you
We're
so
done
much,
now.
Eli.
Thank you, Olivia, for coming here and
My
going through these technical
pleasure.
difficulties.
Oh, it was my pleasure. I would do this any day.
Yay. And I'm glad it was today.
Yes, I'm glad it was today.
I don't know when this is going to come out, so who knows?
Let's
We're going
go-
to be surprised in the future.
Let's go clubbing.
Okay.
Okay.
There's actually a rave tonight.
I know, I heard. Let's go.
Oh my God! Okay.
Okay, thanks, Eli. I love